Hi everybody, Mr. Farmer here, and welcome to AP Micro and Macroeconomics. Today we're talking about specialization, trade, and comparative advantage. Now this is a topic that is both in AP Micro and AP Macroeconomics in the Unit 1 of the course description for AP Economics. So here we go. First off, what is it we're talking about? This idea of specialization and what we're going to prove with the idea of comparative advantage is that by working with other, and you can see this case, states, for example, for maple syrup or corn or oranges, by working with other states, other companies, other countries, you should be able to increase the productivity of a resource. Allows for greater total output that would otherwise be possible. So even though this is a very old idea, we see talk about exchanges and trade in ancient Greece and Italy and everywhere else. And even current day, we still see this. So this isn't a new idea, just trying to prove that it's still true. All right, here we go. Okay, so we've got good old Adam Smith, 1776, wrote the book The Wealth of Nations, and in it talks about it is the maxim of every prudent master of a family never to attempt to make at home what will cost him more to make than to buy. What's that mean? If it's cheaper for me to go buy something from somewhere else than it is for me to produce it, then I should go ahead and do that. I should specialize. I'm really good at doing this. You're good at doing that. Well, if we work together, we're both going to be better off later. Nations specialize for the same reasons. You're good at producing cars. I'm better at producing planes or whatever else it might be, working with that. Exchange and specialize for greater overall output and income. You do this when you do group projects. I will do part A, you focus on part B, and therefore you produce it faster. Now here's kind of a little gimmicky example. So we're going to have two countries, A and B. A is the blue, B is the black, and they can produce capital and consumer goods. A can produce 150 of capital goods or 75 consumer goods. B can produce 150 consumer goods or 75 capital goods. And that's if they specialize, if they do one or the other. Or if they kind of do a little bit of both, both of them could produce 60 units of each. So what's this idea of specialization, trade, everything else? Here's the idea. If they each just do what they're good at, you can see A is probably better producing capital goods, B is better producing consumer goods. If they both just specialized and then they traded, they just 50-50'd it, they would each get 75 units of each. So what do we see? By specializing, by trading, they exceed what they can do on themselves. They used to be at 60 and 60. Now they would get 75 units of both capital and consumer goods. This is the concept behind specialization, behind trade, behind comparative advantage. And yes, countries absolutely do this. This is the from the Census Bureau of 2018. These are the top 15 trade partners with the United States. And guess what? This exists. Maybe to nobody's surprise, China's #1 trade partner. We exported $74 billion of goods and we imported 296. I think this is in billions of dollars. After that, we have the NAFTA group, North America Free Trade Agreement. So you got Canada and Mexico. And then you can see all the other countries. The point of this is that yes, countries do trade. Why? Because it's the maxim of every prudent master to get the best that you can. And the best is you work with other people, other countries, other companies, other people. So as we go through, we're going to have a couple of assumptions for us, kind of the academic versions. One, there's only two participants in the system, country A, country B, whoever else it might be. Second, we're only producing two goods, consumer, capital goods, X, Y, whichever else. And the quality is going to be negligible difference. We're just going to assume it's kind of the same thing. So out of this, we get two conversations. The first one is what we call absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is simply a person, firm, or country, again, this is both micro and macro, can they simply produce more of the goods, just numerically. If I can produce 20 of something and you can produce 10 of something, I have the absolute advantage because 20 is larger than 10. Second one is comparative advantage. Again, you can scale this to micro or macro, a person, a country, a firm, whichever. This talks about the opportunity cost. If I produce good A, and all my resources, my lands, labor, capital, entrepreneur, all the factors of production, if they go towards good A, that means I'm giving up the opportunity of producing good B. So whatever I gave up, that's my opportunity cost. So whoever has the lower opportunity cost, they would be said to have the comparative advantage in that good, which means they should produce that good. So here's another random story. So in my household, we have kids, and we talk about Fred and Ted. So Fred is the green tall guy, and Ted is the small red guy. They're best of friends, but they're opposites. So in my scenario, they build cars and they build planes. Fred, it costs $20,000 to build a car and $5,000 to build a plane. Ted costs $10,000 to build a car and $7,500 to build a plane. Here's the question. Who should produce the cars? I gave you a subtle hint. It should be Ted. Who should build the planes? Again, a little subtle hint. It's going to be Fred, the green guy. How do I know that? Well, for Ted, it costs $10,000 to build a car, and it costs Fred $20,000. Well, $10,000 is cheaper. So yeah, Fred, please build a car, and maybe you're going to sell it to Fred for the plane he just produced because it cost him $5,000 versus yours $7,500. This concept is the core question of comparative advantage. Who should produce what? How do we benefit? That's what we're discussing. Now, from the textbook I use, it's McConnell-Bruce 17th edition. One example is the United States and Mexico, and they can produce corns and melon. So if the United States specializes in production of corn, they produce 5 units of corn and 0 melons, and then 0 and 2 for corn and melons respectively. For Mexico, it's 1 unit of corn and 1 unit of melon if they specialize. Now, this table is a little confusing to kind of use and look at. So a lot of times I'll just kind of combine it, and so it looks about like this. So these are the specialized numbers, so similar kind of idea. So who has the absolute advantage in melons? The United States. Why? Because they can produce 2 and Mexico can only produce 1. Who has the absolute advantage in corn? Again, in this case, it's the United States. Why? 5 is greater than 1. So in this case, the United States has the absolute advantage in both goods. But does that mean they should produce both goods? No. For that, we need to know the comparative advantage. So even though this is usually how it looks to start with, you'll be given a production possibility frontier or production possibility curve. You might even be given this in a word problem. I usually switch this around to look about like this. Just a nice T-chart. I put it vertically, and you'll kind of see why. So typically, this is kind of how I put it this way. Now, for the comprehensive comparative advantage question, there are 5 steps to follow, and we're going to go through those 5. Okay. So the first one is to just figure out who actually has the comparative advantage. So here we are in step 1. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make one of the units common. Now, sometimes you'll be identified which version, if it should be melons or corn. It doesn't actually matter. So I'm just going to do the one that's on the left because it's on the left. That's the only rhyme reason for why I picked melons. So how do I do that? Well, since I could produce 2 melons, I'm going to divide it by 2. And I'll divide the other side also by 2 because that's math. And so what does this mean? For the United States, when they produce 1 unit of melons, they give up an opportunity cost of 5 halves of production of corn, or 2.5 units. For Mexico, we're already 1-to-1, but I'm going to do that anyway. So I'm going to divide both sides by 1. So Mexico, if they produce 1 unit of melons, they have the opportunity cost of they give up the production of 1 unit of corn, potentially. So my melon is now 1-to-1. I have a common number. I can now compare the opportunity costs, which are the 5 halves and the 1. Since Mexico has the lower opportunity cost, they give up 1 unit of corn to produce 1 melon versus the United States is 5 halves. Mexico has the comparative advantage in melons. So you can see the opportunity cost down here. 1 melon for the United States has opportunity cost of 5 halves, and it's a 1-to-1. Now, one thing you'll notice is I typically like to circle, or I'll just write CA for comparative advantage right near the country that has a comparative advantage, because throughout the entire series we're going to do, we're going to want to know that. So that's step 1. Who has the lowest comparative advantage? The United States is going to have the lower comparative advantage in the production of corn. The reciprocal math is going to prove that to be true. We can always go ahead and check that. And we already proved mathematically that Mexico has it for melons. So that's step 1. Next step, trade range. So the trade range is the acceptable range that would be agreed upon by both the buyer and the seller of the melons and the corn and everything else. So here's the trade range right here. What I'm going to do is I put the common good we did, the 1 melon, on the left-hand side. And then I'm going to look at the seller of the melon, which in this case is Mexico. They want to sell this for more than 1 unit of corn. Otherwise, they're not making a profit off of this. It's like saying, I made this good for $10. I'll sell it to you for $6. That makes absolutely no sense. So they want more than 1 unit of corn. In the same way, the United States, who is buying the melon, they can make it for 5 halves. So they want to buy it for less than that. So this is how we get the range. I look at the opportunity cost of both the buyer, Mexico, and the seller, United States, of the melon to get my range. Once we have this range, we can then identify the terms of trade, which is specifically what number fits in the range I got. So find X. I just pick a nice easy number. So for me, 2 is greater than 1, but less than 2 halves. Yes, that would actually give Mexico a larger benefit over the United States. And in actual trade relations, this gets really complex. This has broken down relationships before between different countries. We just get to pick a nice easy number like 2. So the term of trade is going to be specifically 1 melon gets traded for 2 corns. Now get a pause. Here's why. Typically, this is actually where College Board typically stops the questions. For multiple choice especially, College Board tends to stop at these first 3 dynamics. It is possible that they keep going or they talk about economic gains in a different way, but typically it is just these first 3, which is. With that said, if they do ask about economic gains, we do need to do the next step of number of trades. So what I have here are the specialized numbers. So I know the United States is going to specialize in corn and make 5, and Mexico is going to specialize in melons and make 1. So what we're trying to do is determine how many trades each side can do at their most. The lowest number is going to be the limiting factor. So I first off need to know between Mexico and the United States, how much do they have? So Mexico has 1 unit of melon. We see that from comparative advantage. The United States has 5 corn. Again, we see that from over here. What are we going to do? We're going to plug in that terms of trade we found in the third section, 1 to 2. When we plug into this, we're going to find that the United States could trade 2.5 times. Mexico could trade 1 time. We're just dividing these numbers right here, which means the countries are going to trade 1 time because, again, the lowest number is the limiting factor. Since Mexico only traded 1 time, after that, they have nothing else to trade. Okay, now for the last one. Economic gains. Now what we're talking about is economic gains for an individual country or company. It's going to be for the United States in our scenario actually. So we're going to need some information that we've been gathering throughout. First off, who is trading what? From step 1 we found out the United States is trading corn. They have comparative advantage there. And Mexico is doing the melons. Number of goods to trade. United States 5 corns, Mexico 1 melon. Terms of trade, number of trades, we just figured all of this out. So what are we going to do? We're going to take these last 2 little pieces of information and we're going to plug them in. So first off, after 1 trade, Mexico is going to export 1 melon. That's the -1 over there, so they get left with 0. That gets exported to the United States. We're going to add 1 over there, hence they get 1. After 1 trade and 2 corn being traded each time, well, we're going to subtract the 2 from United States. So 5 minus 2, they still have 3 units of corn. Mexico, 0 plus the 2, so they have 2 units left over. So after specialization and trade is completed, the United States has 1 and 3, and Mexico has 0 and 2. Now for economic gains, what we're trying to figure out is by choosing to trade with each other, how much did they gain? Now again, they actually have the numbers up here in green. What we want to do is figure out, did they make the right choice by working with each other? So we need the before specialization numbers. Now these would be given to you. Okay, here they are. They would be given to you in a that would be like the 60 and the 60 from the companies A and B making the capital consumer goods, or you'd be given this in some other way. You do not make these up. So that's where these numbers are. The before specialization are these red numbers. What are the economic gains, e.g., is the United States could have produced 1 and 2 on its own? What we're going to do? Plug these in. So after specialization and trade, the United States had 1 melon. If they had chosen to not do that, they would have had 1 melon. So they actually get 0 advantage for melons. How about for corn? Well, they could have produced 2 corn on their own. So now they have 3, they would have had 2, so they've gained 1 additional unit of corn. So those are the United States' economic gains. If the question asked about Mexico, what I would have talked about is how if Mexico had specialized in corn on their own, they would have made 1 unit of corn. Now by trading, they have 2. They've actually doubled their productivity compared to the production possibility curve. So yes, Mexico is still gaining from this. Here's the alternative. Who has the absolute advantage in guns and butter? Again, that's a historical thing for peace versus wartime production. For different governments have used those as metaphors. So you see guns and butter a lot for economic production possibility curves. So we have country A, country B. Who has the absolute advantage in guns? Neither. How do I know it's neither? Because both of them can produce 75 units of guns, and tie goes to nobody. Nobody has an advantage. They're just equal. How about for butter? Well, country B has the absolute advantage in butter because 50 is greater than 25. Okay. Now the next question is, who has comparative advantage and what's the economic gains for this economy? It's not country A, it's not country B, it's the whole economy. And so this is an easier question. It's also one that is more typical of College Board to ask. So we get our numbers. First step is that comparative advantage. So again, we're going to simplify it down. I did guns because it's on the left-hand side. That's the only reason I did that. So what we find is that for country A, 1 unit of guns costs 1/3 of a unit of butter. And for country B, 1 unit of guns costs 2/3 of butter. Well, since 1/3 is less than 2/3, A has a comparative advantage in guns, B has a comparative advantage in butter. Great. Here's the nice part. Because it's talking about the community of country A and B combined, I don't need to know the terms of trade, the number of trades, or anything else, because I don't need to worry about who ends up with what. I just need to know, combined, did they do better? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my after specialization numbers. Country A made 75 guns, so as a community, they have 75 guns. B made butter, so as a community, they have 50 units of butter. Now I need to do the before specialized numbers. Well, if they had not worked together, A would have made 25 units and B would have made 40 units of guns, for a combined 65. 75 minus a combined 65 means they gained 10 additional units as a community by working together. For butter, they would have made 10 units of butter from country A and 10 units of butter from country B, for a combined 20 units. 50 minus 20, they've gained 30 units. That's it. So again, this is actually more typical, and this is an easier version of this. So as far as comparative advantage, this is about what you can do. There is another version, which is an input question, meaning how many hours does it take to make one good, but that's a different conversation. Hope that made sense. Until next time.